Hi everyone, welcome back into the classroom, into the studio here. We're going to do a Western today, and like I always say with a lot of them, doesn't necessarily have to be a Western. I'm going to teach you some landscape techniques, and then of course painting the horse in a Western, but you can change it into anything. Like what we're going to do today is, and I'll explain to you here how I kind of put it all together, but I'm going to do, I love this photo of this man and this dog here. And these are, I took 3 Adobe stock photos. So these are available on Adobe stock. And those of you that are members of the channel, I'll put all of the reference and a line drawing and stuff over in the community page for you to download and start yourself. But anyway, so I put it kind of together. This was a horseman I got from Adobe Stock, so I shoved him in there. I like to use Photoshop. You've seen me say that 1,000 times. And then I put them all on this background, and then and this is a separate one with the man and the horse. It's a beautiful one. The man, the horse, and the dog. And so I thought that would make a really neat one. And I added him in here. I was going to put some cows, but I always put the cows. But I always like to add another subject in here that is a little bit smaller. That helps me with depth. And there's a tremendous amount of depth back here going back to these mountains that are probably 30 miles away over there, So, yeah, it's going to be kind of fun to paint. So, anyway, we'll work on getting that distance and stuff. So I put this together with at least 3 photos. And then I sketched it on, moved it over here to the 14 by 18. So it's 14 inches this way, 18 inches this way. I gave it a couple coats of canvas prep medium, and then you can see from the white powdery stuff here, I sanded it lightly with 180 grit sandpaper, and then we'll get ready to go, okay? My palette out here, this is my standard working palette that I do here on the channel, and I've added 2 other colors here, the medium beige and the medium white, which I like to do when I do landscapes and westerns. And I'll put a list of all the colors and everything that I use down below in the video description, so you can look at the color names and stuff over there, along with the links for anything that's kind of important. I also wanted to show you this, okay? Not all, and I say this several times in my videos, but there's a lot of beginners coming in and trying new things. And I've been I was an acrylic chemist for many years, back in the 80s and the 90s. And art just really took over my life. And but I designed these colors back in 2008 with another company. And since then, that company has advanced some of the acrylics even further. So not all acrylics are the same. So if you use a different brand of acrylics and a different thing in an acrylics and it doesn't work, of course, not all acrylics are the same. Some dry fast, some dry slow. And the new mediums that were coming out with acrylics do magnificent things. I wanted to show you. So this is the palette that I used on my last video, which was the Pettit study. So you can go back one video. That is like 5 days ago that I did that video. And so this palette, all my acrylics that I had here are all dry. You can see, I mean, they're dry. They're gripped on. These are dry. This is a little moist underneath there, but not much. They're dry, right? This is the open medium that I used in that painting. Okay, haven't done anything to it. This is the open medium. Now watch. It is still absolutely perfect. After 5 days of sitting on my palette here in this, and it's 70 degrees in here right now. It's been 70 degrees for those 5 days. It does not dry. The open medium is a new generation, just like this is the same extender that I used on that video. This is the open medium. Matter of fact, I will just I'll just transfer some of this over and use some of this up onto this video. And it is fantastic stuff. This is new generation stuff. So, when I use the open medium, or someone says, oh, it doesn't work for me or something like that, not all acrylics are going to accept that open medium. It has specifically formulated formulated for their line of acrylics. And since they manufacture our line of acrylics for us, it's formulated and works with our line of acrylics. The open medium. So this is called the open medium. And it does just that. It keeps your acrylics open for a long period of time, depending upon how much you use. But you can see that's 5 days. You never think that an acrylic can act that way, right? Okay, so let's go into the painting. So we're going to push these mountains way back. And before, when I painted westerns or painted landscapes with you, and we're going to push a lot of depth to the mountains. As the further you go back, a couple things happen. The atmosphere. You could see the atmosphere all throughout here, right? And then it slowly changes and comes up to the clear colors here. That's the atmosphere. And I like how some artists call it the humidity in the air. That's the atmosphere, right? And so, which works really well. But you'll see the detail and stuff like that, the edges. So when I do a lot of scraping and all that kind of stuff, the edges are softer, the colors are softer. You don't see as much. So here's the white snow on the back of the mountain. This is the shadow side. Sun's light's coming in this way. You don't have a tremendous amount of difference between light and shadow the further back you go into the scene. So that's what we're going to start out with, all right? So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to set our sky, our value of our sky, and it's going to be right between an 8 and a 9. And it's a violet, so that's what we're going to do. So I'll take a little bit of blue here, and I'm going to want to start this out like I do. I always like to start my skies out kind of thin. So we're going to take some blue, we'll add some white, and a little bit of our violets here, because we want this to go to a blue violet, and we'll probably want it a little lighter than this that I have here. And so I'll squirt out a little extra white so I don't use up all my stuff, because I'm right about an 8 or so. Yeah, I'm right at an 8 right there. There's your 8. It's right between an 8 and a 9. It could go just a touch lighter here. Let me grab a little bit of white so I don't use up all my white. I'm going to use a lot of that white up onto the ground. So I'll just add a little more white to this here. And so we'll lighten this up right between a value 8 and a 9 here. And we'll take a look. Yeah, it could go a little more violet. If I add that violet, then I'm going to need to add a little more white to it. So we'll just come close. Let me just grab a little bit of this for right now. And we'll mix this all up. And I'll take the time. Now, I'm taking a lot of time trying to get this color pretty darn close to it. And that's because it's going to set the color here for my painting. I'm just a touch too violet. But it will take just a hair here of that phthalo. That phthalo, those of you that paint along with me, you know that phthalo is really powerful and it will set the tone. But I do like to have a little modeling in the sky, so we'll set a little more phthalo in there in just a minute. But that'll work pretty good. Now, let's just add I'm just going to add a little bit of extender here right to it. Maybe about 20% or so right into this and mix it up. This is going to, the extender and the open medium both slow it down way. So that extender's been open all the time here too. What's the main difference? The extender is thinner. And so when I paint skies and when I paint shadows, into areas and stuff, I like shadow, and like most Alla Prima artists, we like our shadows to be transparent. And we like in my first go with the colors, I like it to be transparent. So I'm going to add a little extender here. And I'm going to take this color, and I'll put it on pretty heavy, but I do like to have that extender in it. So, but I'll put it on just a little bit heavy here. And then I'm going to add some more extender here, thin it way out, and I'm going to pull this down here. Now, I've got it a little bit where I've lost some of my drawing, but I'm not going to worry about that yet. I'm just going to get this on, because I want this down in the painting here for a bit here. And I'll show you, we're going to be able to wipe it here in just a minute. But up at the top, I'll go a little heavier here, because we can put on some of those misty clouds. Let me poke it underneath that little clip there. And we can, do stuff like that. But I'm going to thin it out. Let's take it off my drawing here just a bit. And if it doesn't remove too much, and people ask, how do you keep your drawing from moving? I use these contractor pencils. They're really hard lead and they don't move on you. And so I can add just a little bit of water, just like this, and really take some of that off here. I'll just take a little bit of this off. but I want this down quite far because we're going to add a lot of depth to this whole scene here. So that'll work pretty well in there. Now, I can, all depends on what you want. I can model in, let me go to like a 3/4 inch brush. I can model in here, a little extender, some of this blue. I call this the atmosphere. So I'll have you can see the blue violet, just a real soft blue violet to the blue green here of the phthalo. Phthalo is a blue green. And so by adding the violet to it, I get a blue violet. So I get that kind of, that difference, what I call the atmosphere of the clouds. Now I can take a little soft white and push some of this back in here. Like this is just really soft clouds back here. And your marks, when you make your marks here, like if I'm building a cloud that's further forward, I can have a large cloud. But when you can see these are really dinky kind of clouds. And they're, we'll pick up some of this color later and add that to it. Matter of fact, we probably could add just a touch of warmth of that medium beige that will be in there. And add just a touch of that into the sky. Very simple. I don't want this to be about the sky, but I'm just adding a little soft movement that you see in there. And a little bit of that warmer, some of that beige and stuff works great in there. Maybe we'll give a little streak of like a bit of a lighter bit one here, one or two here. Just for a little bit of interest in there. Right up there like that. Just very, very soft. You hardly see it. Now, let's come in and let's take our atmosphere and our white. We're just going to go up in value. Okay, so we take our atmosphere color, our sky, and our white. And I'm just going to put a little bit of that right on there, right there. Now, and when I look at it, and it's hard for you to see because it's small, but this is actually just a touch warm. So I'm going to add just a touch of the beige there to it. And we'll come right in here. I kind of lost my mountain, so I'll draw it again here. And we'll use this to kind of set that light here. And right in there like that. Let's set it a little lighter. So I can do a couple values, but I don't want to get too crazy with it. Does that make sense? Too much difference, light and dark difference here, because that's what's really going to send this mountain to the back is keeping the colors very simple here and keeping my movements very simple, because any kind of movement and color variation and stuff will bring that object forward. Okay, so we keep that in mind here. So there's another little bit of that right up here that just comes down there like that, and we'll keep that kind of soft. A little bit of that grain and stuff right off here. We're going to add I'm just adding some of the marks of snow and stuff around here, and we'll get some of the other mountain colors in there in just a minute. And you could start with, it doesn't make a difference, you could start with the mountain colors as well. I've done that 1,000 times, you've seen me. So, and then add the snow. It doesn't really make a difference which way you're going to go here. Which one you want to do first. Here, let's just add a few little streaks of that. So we'll get some of that. Let's get it a little heavier, a little lighter right up here. So a little bit of definition, but not much. Not as much as you see me in other paintings. Now, why? Because we're further back. This mountain is way back there. So I can have a little bit of texture, but I don't want to paint with a tremendous amount of texture or anything like that, because that's just going to bring it forward. Now, let's come over here. Let's grab some more violet, a little bit of our blue and blue violet, and a little bit of beige here. And we will take this color, a little bit more blue, some white here. Let's see. And this is where, especially You know, when you're painting a depth of a painting like this, for me, one of the colors that's hard for me to see is those violets, and you know, just how violet or how light something is. So I always tell somebody is I always take a little piece of paper, and let's just set this to the side here. And we want to be, the ultimate goal is we want to be a little bit lighter than what our photo reference is. So you can see, I can hold that up there. I need to be a little bit more violet. Now that'll dry darker, so I need to be a little bit lighter. So let's grab a little bit more violet here and a little bit lighter here. We can just grab some of this dirty stuff here. And again, like most things that we paint, guys, I just want to come close, right? So let's clean that just a bit. And then we know we have this. I use paper like this when I'm emulating the masters all the time to try to find them. So we know that color is really close, and you can see it's a little bit lighter, and that will dry a touch darker. So it's pretty close now. I got an extra snow there touching into that. So this would be a good color for me to start into here on these mountains. And I'll take some other colors, some blues and stuff like that, and work that into this color. This is just my first look. So, but I want to keep all the values and stuff very compressed. Does that make sense? So as I put this on, now it's going to dry a little darker, but this is my first look. Does that make sense? This is my first look, and I'll just tap this around. I use my knife a lot for these kinds of stuff as well. I'll start to add my linear perspective here. This is atmospheric and linear perspective here as I start to pull here. So we're going to create that little valley back there. And I'll take this very little in my brush, tap a bit of this, and just run it right through some of that to get some of that mottled look in there that we have there. We'll get some more darks and stuff in there as well, but this is our first look, right? And I'll use this maybe with a little more blue, touch of white, so it's not quite as dark, and we'll use this to set up the shadow side here on this mountain here. And notice it's like you barely see the difference. You go, are you doing anything there, Dave? Well, it will show up more as it dries. This is the hardest thing, I think, with acrylics, is that the colors dry a little darker. And so you've got to kind of plan for that. Just a value or so for that as you're putting that in. Here we've got to plan some of that, and we'll just model this through here, a few little touches here as we set some of those mountains. Everything is really what we call compressed. I'm taking these colors, compressing them very close together, so there's not a lot of difference between light and shadow on these back mountains. And that's because they're so far back and the atmosphere is so far back. We could use a little more light right up on the edge of this, right in there, before it hits that shadow right there. Now that I have that, let's go. And I think I've used that with that 3/4 inch brush. And you try to use as large a brush as possible because that's less marks. Does that make sense? Because you're way back. Look at those mountains. I mean, I go look at the Rockies all the time because we're a couple hours here on the plains. We're in Nebraska, on the plains of Nebraska. But we're 2 hours, 20 minutes away from Denver and the Rockies. And so we go there all the time. And so this is what they start to look like way out in the distance. And then you get closer and you start seeing more stuff. So I have this. I'm going to go to a little smaller brush. I'm going to go to a little bit more blue. I like to neutralize that blue, little red or a little burnt sienna. This starts to gray it. And I want that bit of violet in there as well. So I'm going to go a little darker. I want a little more violet. I'm going to grab a little bit of my red violet, which is a more powerful violet here. and make that even darker. And then I'm going to lighten it up just a bit here. So you can see the difference between my two colors here. And let's take this and let's just work this real soft here. Not a lot of it, just a little bit of it into here. Tapping into some of these areas here, like this. Okay. A little bit up into here. Dragging through just a bit to create some of those marks, those dragging marks, right? But you can see, oh, I could get a little darker, like right up in through here. But I'll work it wet right into this, and let's just model this movement. I'll look for movement here. And if I get too dark, I just come back and lighten it up again. Just like that, right? And let's put a little bit of that darkness right in there. Here. Touch of those little ridge lines right in there. Just a bit of that. Keeping it very soft, and this is going to dry darker, so we've got to keep that in mind here. Just a little. I just wiped most of that paint right off my brush like this, so I have just a little bit in there to help give just a bit to that shadow mark there. Right, like that, so I get that shadow side. A little heavier than what you see there, but that's okay. And I'll add some extender as I need. If this starts to tack up or anything, I'll add some extender. Let's work this a little bit more. Now that's a little dark, so what I'll do is I just wipe my brush. I don't take it off. Wipe my brush and work back through it, and it'll mix up into the slightly lighter mountain color that I had there already. Does that make sense? Okay, so I'm painting into the slightly lighter color that I had there. And then we'll add a few more of these little ridge lines, just with my brush kind of flat, like this. That adds those, but I want to keep those. We could turn it on its side here and add some more streaks if we want, but I want to keep this, I love that. I want to keep this a little bit simplistic because I want your eye all the way back up here to the front. So let's add a little extender, thin it out. As I get darker, I love to get thinner because the dark colors are very powerful. So I'll thin it out a bit. Work, not big, huge, long ones, some shorts, but work some of this right up and into that mountain there. So you just catch the planes of that mountain a little bit back. Let's go, let's push this mark. I could have a little more right in there. Here. Just for some differences there. I love some of the Western painters, Western masters, and how they just very, very simplistically come in here and add some of these colors and some of this movement and knock out a mountain like that pretty quick. And I'm going to get there. I still play with it a little bit too much. I'm going to go back to some of my light right up here. And that has a lot of dark in my brush, so I'll add some more white here. And let's push in. And so now what I'm doing is looking for some of those ridge lines, a little bit more interest into it. Here, I'll put this nice gentle slope in there. Work that through. That's kind of pretty. So see, I'm working both, right? So you're working both, and that's the thing. And one of the things we always think about as an artist is what we call simultaneous contrast. So as you put on one color, it will affect the look of the other color. So as I put on this dark, it'll make my lights look lighter. And so now I can come back. So really what I did is I'm blocking in. I'm starting with, just like I do birds and everything else, guys, I start with like an undertone, a median tone, and then I'll darken and lighten from that tone. Does that make sense? As I work that color. So we'll add a little bit of that light right in there. Maybe a gentle little sweep of it right there. Little mark. Let's give it just a bit back there. A little bit of difference there. Let's, this is wider right up on the original, so I'll widen this just a bit here. Let's give it a dose of a little lighter color, because I like that look right there. So a little more lighter color. Get rid of that ridge. I don't want any ridges to my paint, because that'll bring it too far forward. A lot of Western painters won't worry about that too much, because we'll have so much detail in here that a few ridge lines and stuff like that of the color won't bother us, but I still like to make sure that I don't get too much. But it won't hurt if you get some in there, so don't go worrying about it. Let's just add a few little marks, little touches that we see there, you know, up onto this one. That'll make it look a little closer to this, but we don't have to copy this. But a few little marks there, and that looks pretty good. And then we'll, yeah, let's put just a little bit of light. They're fun to paint. The distant mountains like this are really kind of fun to paint, and leaving some of those marks and stuff in there. So I'm going to look at that. I could pull this down probably a little bit more at this angle. And remember, I always tell you about painting a mountain. It's the angle of your brush creates the slopes. So we'll just add a few little marks. I always like to call this the little pettit marks, like in the last floral. Yeah, I like to do that, call it that. So that just kind of gently puts those mountains in there. And really, that's kind of enough. That's all we really need. That was my number 10, or excuse me, that's my number 8. No, that's my 10. That's my number 10 that I paint. I'm going to paint a lot of the horse with that number 10. So that 10 just does a nice size detail here. Most of that was the 3/4 inch. I can come back with a little softer color if I think this detracts a bit too much with that, and just pull some softer, lighten up just a touch of those shadows anywhere, like right in through here, if I think they detract just a bit too much. And now those mountains really go back. If I want to bring it out even more, you can do stuff like, you could see a little bit more blue right up there. So I can take some of my thin blue here, and I could actually darken that sky back up against that mountain right there where I had that, and that would pop it forward. So you could, you know, a lot of times we back paint with the light against that. You see me in all the time in, you know, videos and stuff all the time of landscapes. I put that light back there, but you could also put it just a little bit darker back there, a little bit more blue, and let that light sky set up a little higher, but let that blue just come up against that light snow there. And see, that just pops it forward. So that gives a pretty good look. It's a little darker in here, but that isn't dry yet. So I'll wait for it to dry later on in the painting. And if I need to, I'll come back. So now let's come forward. So I'm going to take some of my mountain color that I had here, some of my sky color that I had here, and we're going to work some of these colors all the way here up by my cowboys, coming forward here. So to get what we call atmospheric perspective, we have atmospheric perspective and linear perspective. Linear is the brush marks. Atmospheric perspective is becoming more like the sky, right? So we have the linear perspective and the atmospheric perspective. You know, excuse me 1 minute. I just saw up there on that mountain right there. I'm going to bring this edge forward just a little bit more. A little more light. Right on the edge there. Right like that. Bring that edge up. It's a little sharper over there with some of that dark, but I think, let's just add just a touch. I think that would be, that's going to be, I'm just going to let that dry because I can add more. But so we want this in here. Now, here's the warmer color. This is my favorite. This is where I come in with some of my medium beige. So I'm going to take the warmer, and one of the reasons why I really like this was the cool to the warm. It is just like a wildlife that we painted together, Carl Rungus, you know, who was the master wildlife painter. He loved to do this warm cool into all of his wildlife. And, after I started to really study him, I love that. So I'm going to work the warm right into the cool here and let this kind of slowly disappear here. Because you see it? See the warm disappearing, right? You see a little bit of the warm disappearing here. And so we'll leave a little bit of strokes, a few strokes there. Let's take just a touch of that wet paper towel to take him out of his head here, because this is our first look. So we're going to adjust this. Let's put some warm right up here, and then we'll let this streak, just let it kind of streak, lift the pressure, let it disappear as it's going back there. Just some marks of it, some short marks of it, and then we'll bring it forward heavier here. So with these fusion brushes, I just lift the pressure, and the fusion brush will do its job. And so we'll get a little warmer coming forward here. So we see that just disappearing. And we can take a touch of blue, touch of violet, a little bit of burnt sienna here. Let's just take some of this, a little more blue here. Real soft, kind of bluish right in between the two. The color that we see right in there. And we'll just lightly streak some of that in there. Could have a little more blue in it. A little more blue. Let's get that blue and that violet. Blue, violet, a little more. Some extender so we don't get too much here. But we know in the landscapes, as we come forward, I'm going to wipe some of the extra out of my brush. Oops, got a little heavy right there. Let's add just a touch of light, which softens the color. There we go. See how it softens the color a bit? So we'll work some of this right into there. It could be a little bit more blue down in there. Do you see that? Do you see that color? And I don't, so many times when I paint with you guys, I always say, I don't like to copy. I like to do my thing here, but we're talking about getting some of this depth, and I really want to show you, how you can do this, because part of being an artist is being able to emulate, not always copy, but emulate the colors that you're seeing out there in nature. And so these are just a combination of warm and cool colors that are creating some of that depth back there. Does that make sense? And so I'm going to work a little bit. I'm going to go to this other red violet, which is a more powerful red violet, which will give me a more powerful bluish color. And I'm going to take this, soften it just a bit, but I'm going to leave it a touch darker. Because I feel that this color, let's put it on the thing here. I feel that color is going to be, yeah, it is, very close. But it's a little darker, right? See, it's a little darker. But I'll lighten it just a little bit in my brush, and I'll work it right into some of these light colors right here. That little bit of value difference will give me some of the streaks, and then if I darken it too much, I'll work the light back into it. Does that make sense? Okay, so let's just put a little bit of that right out through here, right out through there like that. That's helping us establish the depth. So there you can see it. Do you see it right here before it takes up over here? So let's put a bit of that right in there. And I don't want to do one big long one because that's too distracting. But we want to have it. I like some smaller movements. Smaller, yeah, that's a word. Some smaller movements here. Some of that. Right out like that. That works pretty good. We'll get rid of a few of those brush marks. Keep that absolutely kind of smooth. And so got that nice color variation. I could have a little bit more dark. Some of that right in through here. And that's up to you. This is contrast now. How much contrast do you want to have in there? I do like a little bit of that. Here, let's just pull that right up here. A bit of that. That's a nice little but the edges have to be soft. I don't want those edges to come too far forward. So I soften them, I blur them edges. So if I do a real defined edge, like see how blurry that is? That's what's sending it back. But if I do a real defined edge, it brings it too far forward. So I don't want to do that. Let's put just a touch into some of that here. I just love painting with the big brush. Just a touch more blue, slightly different color here. Just put a streak or two in there. Pull there like that. That's pretty good there. And yeah, we'll pull back out of his hat there a bit. Now see his hat, I don't want that color. I actually want to paint around his hat a bit. I don't want that color going too much into his hat because that's going to bring that hat really forward. Now, we coming forward here. So now we're going to take our medium beige. We're going to brighten it with some yellow oxide, maybe a bit of white here. And we're going to start the warmer. Oh boy, that is like really close there. A little bit of the atmosphere color in there. And we'll start some of the warmer color here. Right up to the front. Let some of that disappear back there. And here we go. And you'll see that start to come forward here, see? So it sets up that feeling. But you see, I took just a little bit of this atmosphere and worked just a bit of it into there, see? And then let it take over to the beiges and stuff, and that's where you're going to get that. Now, this has a bit, and we'll take some of these nice, beautiful tones here from the horses and put it back in there. We could do that right now if we wanted a little bit of that burnt sienna. Some extender. Let's just work this in back through here. We'll work this thin. Let's just go thin right here so I don't destroy all my drawing. We'll take a bit of our blue and beige and work into that just a bit because we can bring that horse's rump up forward. But some of this atmosphere we're going to want into this guy because that's what's going to drop him further back, right? So a little bit of that, maybe a touch of that burnt sienna. I love the burnt sienna and these violets. They're beautiful colors. And that's very much what that color is there. Here. We'll drop some of that in there. Here, some of that will soften that exchange back there. Right like that. Let's put some of that color right in here. Very close to what I have right there. And I like to do that. You've seen me do that before. I put this photo, which I'll put a PDF printable thing for you in those of you that are members. I'll put it in the channel for you so you can have that. Oh, darn, I took out too much of that blue. But I'll put that over there into the community page so you can have that. And let's thin this out so you can have that exact. And let's just get that right back in there, a little softer. Let's get that color back in there. Leave a little bit of it though. I love that slow. Carl Rungus was beautiful with this, but sometimes he painted these magnificent quick changes of light and warm and cool. So we have the cool and we have the warm, but sometimes he would really paint that quick change, and they're beautiful. This contrast of those quick changes are really quite beautiful. Let's put just a touch of that burnt sienna in there. Going to go right around this dog. I love this little dog. I saw this photo and while I was searching around, and I just love it. We're going to put those grasses real thick, just like you see there. So we'll get some of that in there. Here. We'll get some of this right up here. Push a bit of that right in there. But we've got to get just a touch. We'll correct our atmosphere here in just a minute on this back horse. So he goes right perfect into that. So we'll take just a bit of our atmosphere sky and we'll push just a bit over into that. So he'll soften out. So he'll push further back just a bit. He'll push just back just a bit there. Okay. And what I'll do here is I'm going to take that color real thin. Here, we'll take some of it off of his hat and stuff there. But I'm just going to wash this into him kind of thin because he's going to get this. He's got to take on some of that coloring to go back there. Does that make sense? And so there's a couple ways like we can work on this, but while that's wet like that, I'll just show you. I mean, you can set up what I call a benchmark color. You've heard me mention that. I do it in landscapes a lot. I set up what I call benchmark color. So while that's wet, and I'm not real sure exactly what I'm going to do with the horse and stuff, I'll just grab some of the horse color that I know is going to be the burnt sienna, and maybe a little bit of the blue, which is the burnt sienna and the blue, which makes the darker horse color here. I'll add some, because when I'm dark, I like to add extender. And then I will paint a real light wash of this into this wet, excuse me, into this wet color here, and of the wet ground. And this kind of shows me what the color it is I need to do that. So as you can see, I've started him out here, but I can go a little bit more color-wise. And so I'll paint out through. I drew him once here. I'll draw him again. I'll paint out through, but I'm looking to set what colors that's going to set him a little further back, and then this guy will come a little further forward. Does that make sense? And so I do this sometimes in landscapes. I call these benchmarks. I set up a benchmark color. I started doing it when I was doing a lot of the Dutch master studies back 20 years ago, and they would set benchmark colors up because those set the movement of light through their painting. And so I said, that was such a great idea. I started incorporating that technique into a lot of things that I did. And so while this is wet, I can paint into with that background really easy and put in some atmospheric depth to see what that horse is going to be like. Does that make sense? And I'll be able to darken it and lighten it, but that just gives me what the tone's going to be. So then I'd come in and I'd check that tone. So I'll take some of the burnt sienna, a little bit of blue. Sometimes I like to add a little green to that here. That's too much. I'll come right over here as a beautiful kind of a darker tone that's going to be right in here onto his neck and stuff. And you can see, boy, that dark tone pushes that guy way to the back, right? That pushes him way to the back here. And so we'll get rid of that. There, that saddle, the chest strap there. But you can see as I work this color into them there, you see he's going to be there. And I can just lightly, I'll take some of this dark, add some of this atmosphere to it, and use this to help set up some of the shadow on this horse here. So I can paint him with an idea of light and shadow. And I know that this guy's going to come way forward and he's going to stay way back. And so the easiest way to do that is just, with the wet color like that and painting into your wet ground color, your wet atmosphere. And if I really want him to recede, I add that atmospheric color right to his tones that I'm using to kind of find him here. I add that atmospheric color. So we'll do a lot on him, but so you can see I'm starting to set him right into place there. We'll do some more stuff on it, but yeah, that works pretty well. And I'll take some of this, maybe a little yellow with that, a little warmer since this is the light side, warm side. here. And let's go a little more yellow, burnt sienna, maybe a touch of red, this nice warm light, warm. Back up over here, blur that just a bit. I'm going to watch my edges here, and I want this to recede, so watch my edges. So I don't paint a harsh line. Does that make sense? A lot of times into the paintings, I just don't start them out with a harsh line. So we'll base coat this in, blocking it in. This is what we call a block in. All you newer artists that are hopefully starting out to the channel, yeah, we block in, right? Colors that are close, they don't have to be perfect. But now look at this, and let me put just a touch more of an edge right here. And see, as I get more of an edge, see how that advances that. Now, way ahead of everything else that's there. And, you know, so I know from experience now, so I've painted quite a few Westerns. Not as many as I want. I've only been painting Westerns for about 5 years or so. And so I got a lot to learn on them. I'm going to drag you guys with me as we learn some of this stuff to create different effects. But, you know, I've learned that these colors that I'm putting on here, and, you know, we're going to be doing what we call broken color, half-tone colors and stuff in here to change this. And it's fantastic to change it. Now, all I know is I have to come close. You don't have to be perfect. Just come close. And I know if I just get close, that's all. Don't try to copy or be perfect. So I know I'm going to have this different, but I want this to really, you know, really show up quite a bit here. Let's get some of this dark. So burnt sienna and blue and a little violet, sometimes a little green. Gives me those beautiful darker tones that I like on the horses, on a horse like this, and the shadow tones that I really want to get it, that we're going to get in there, and we're going to do great stuff in there. We'll put a bit of the shadow here, right? But you can see the depth that starts to, you know, maybe visualize that depth. Let's just thin this out, lighten it out a bit, and drag it thin. So, you know, since I've got all this wet tone in there, I can take some of that tone, put it over here, which will give me that harmony. Take this horse a little closer to that one with a little more dark without destroying too much of the depth yet here. And all kinds of just fun techniques. I love if I'm setting up, you know, a lot of depth, like this one's going to have, you know, more depth than you see me paint normally in a Western like this. I like to paint into the wet. That's where I really like to do. Now let's lighten that back up, right up over here. We'll come back with that shoulder. Get rid of that chest strap there. We'll push that shoulder in there. That's going to be his stirrups and stuff. Let's get just a little bit of a light here. A little lighter. But that your eye travels through the darks. And so you've heard me say that in all the landscapes. Your eye traveled through the darks. And so, you know, and this is a beautiful thing. And I did that survey here this last week on the site, you know, on the thing, asking you, do you like, you know, what's some of your stuff? And a lot of you answered the Westerns, which I was glad to hear, because the Westerns adds another element into a landscape. So I call these the Western landscapes. But that other element that it adds is another thing that helps you learn how to paint for depth. Does that make sense? And so we have to learn how to paint two horses here. So they'll look like horses, use colors that harmonize with each other, but then separate them for depth with atmospheric kind of tones and colors. And we'll do that. But it helps you learn to see these tones. Now, these will, as we come up and we start their knobby little knees here, and back in here, we get down towards the fetlocks and stuff. I'm gonna let this fade into the grasses the same, and I'm gonna do over there. And we'll lighten this just a bit. And this is just my first look, guys. Just you don't have to worry about getting perfect. There's that big shoulder right here. Matter of fact, I'm just gonna do that big shoulder here. Some yellow. I'm gonna warm this up. So I got some yellow, a little bit of red. Let's grab just a bit of white in here. Some burnt sienna. Let's just push that big shoulder muscle that's right here. That is real close, but it's a little bit orange, just a touch, I think. But and so one of the colors I love when I get real close like that is green. Watch what happens. See how it grays it back down? So it's not quite so orange. So a little green. Blue sometimes cools it too much, but the green is also warm, which that area is sunlit, so it's going to be warm. So that green is warm, and but it's also, because of the red, green and red, they're complements, so they tone. Does that make sense? Yeah. You know, I had all of my friends over here last week, and we were all painting, and they said that their biggest problem that they had, beginners, all of them haven't been painting but a year, is, you know, knowing how to drive and mix the colors. And I said, you know, that's something that I really need to do a little bit more of. I'm going to get rid of this, that girth strap that's right there. I don't need that right now in that area. So a little bit of violet, a little burnt sienna, a little bit of blue. Beautiful shadow tone here. Let's just push some of that back here into her legs. She's got these legs back here. I really want to put a white face on her, but I've been doing that a lot on my horses in the Western, so maybe it's time for a change here. There we go. But now you can start to see the depth. Now, let's take some of this color. Let's warm it with a little yellow right in here. So this all goes really well with her. Let's just push in this hat. Now, there was a video I did, a Western I did this last year, and it was called Packing Out. And it had some pretty good depth in it, not much as much as this, but it had some pretty good depth in it. And I said one way in which we're going to get a lot of depth into this was his hat coming up against the mountains, because the hat is going to bring all of him forward. And so the hat, his hat here is one of the most forward objects here. We're going to paint it, a lot more careful. But we do want to have some edges here, clean edges, and some here on as we base in this hat, a little more dark here. But some nice clean edges here as we base this in and stuff, and because that crisp exchange between, and I'll look for those areas, between this crisp exchange of this warm to here, and here on the horse's ears, this warm, sharp edge, and the dark there, the atmosphere mountains is what's really going to give a lot of depth there. So that'll be a lot of fun here. So we'll do that. Let's push this edge in here, that front rim right there. And I'm just modeling it. I'll paint it for light and shadow here in just a bit. We'll change some of that up. I love that. That's a nice color. Let's carry that into some of this horse, into some areas here. So the horse here and the dog and stuff is one of my main subjects, and so when I make colors, I like to carry them into some of these as well here. Right in here. That's pretty good. Here. Let's put a little more light right in there, a little warmth. And right in there. A little bit to tone round this off just a bit. So as you're rounding that light coming in towards the shadow, this is what we call a halftone. It is halfway between that color and that color. So it's a halftone. It's a little bit more warm here. We'll paint all of these in here, soften all of those colors in there to really bring that horse forward and stuff. But we got to get some more stuff going on in here first. Now the question is, I'm not a real big fan here of his brown chaps getting lost, I think, a little bit too much in the rest of the painting. So I was thinking about just maybe painting him Levi's colors, which are back to that blue violet. A little bit of extender here. Thin this out. We'll see if we like it, right? I'm not real sure. You know, we'll see if we like this, because I think the Levi color will, again, it's picking up the mountains, but it's a darker color of the mountains, which will cause him to come forward even more. Does that make sense? Now that's probably a little too dark, but we can fix that, work that. So let's just take a little bit of our sky color, work that in for right now, here. And that might work out pretty nice. We could gray that. If it's too bright a blue for you, add just a touch of that red, just the tiniest bit, because that's the complement and gray of it. So, or you can use the horse color, which is also really acceptable, because that's these horse colors right over here, right into that. Now, maybe that's what we do back here for this guy. And I can, so it's real close, but it could be a little more purple and a little more atmospheric. So a little bit here, a little bit lighter, a little bit more atmospheric here. Just take some of that out. There we go. Just it's our first look at it. So here by making this darker and stuff, they give them both these kind of Levi colors. I like this guy. I'll probably make him a lighter gray shirt here. And we'll do all the shadow and light, but I'm just kind of figuring out my colors that I like. So I think I like this. Pull that light back there for a second. I think I like this Levi look to him. I like that. I'll take some of that gray that I just used, and this is what I like to do. I love harmony, so I'll add some of that, especially as I'm coming in here into this shadow area here. There's going to be the saddle and stuff there, but I'll move some of that color into his pants and stuff here so that I carry the color. And I do that also like in a horse or something. I'll carry, usually towards the end of the painting, I'll do that, but I love to just kind of touch and move some of those colors through. That creates a harmony through the painting. And you can start doing that at any time, so we could add a bit of it right now. And then, of course, we'll refine it and work on it and add more later. Let's go to a lighter kind of gray. Now, he has kind of a greenish shirt. His is a little darker. So one I'm going to want a little lighter. I might even go with a more of a white shirt so it brings that light color forward. Does that make sense? So he's actually basically more contrast of the mountains, which would probably be kind of nice. Let's see. Kind of grayed. And then we'll do a little different on the other guy there. But before we do that, so what's going to really make that look lighter here, let me go to a slightly smaller brush. Here, this is my little number 4. And let's go with our burnt sienna here, some dark here, and we'll push in these ears here, which will help us with that depth. And boy, and that warmth. See that nice warmth here. There. Let's take some of this right down here. I just love painting the horses' heads now. They have that big side cheek here. Grab some of this. A little bit of the thin here. I don't know if the mics are picking up my dog snoring again. Yeah, sorry about that, but they love being in here and they snore like crazy. Yeah, so let's put a little bit of light, just like we see on her right in here. I'm going to do a lot of painting development on here. This is just sometimes I'll put light on like this so I can see my light and shadow planes too. And I'm going to add some of that blue, even some of that color from this right up here as I build her nose and front of her face here, which we'll do. Block it off just a bit more, a little more blocky. So we'll work that. That'll work. And let's just touch a little dark in there right now, a little dark violet for that edge. I was looking for my, there it is, my little sticks, because this is all wet, so we'll just pick some of that up a little bit there. Here, there's a little blue, but that's okay. Let's just give a tiny bit over here on her. We'll work that again. Might as well just touch in that little dog. He's going to be fun to paint. There. And we'll just go through, we'll block in, and let's just get rid of some of this, we'll thin this all up, gray it up here. Let's just get rid of some of this white, and then we'll be able to see our painting a little bit more here. Just scrub through. Sometimes I use the tone canvas. You've seen me use that before. Then I don't have to worry about doing this. And sometimes it's just kind of fun just to do this. Now there's that saddle horn right there. And let's bring this face a little wider right up into that neck there. I might even bring her mane. It's not on this side. I might bring her mane over to that side. Same with her over there. So we'll see. Let's get the burnt sienna. Medium beige, a little yellow. And let's get a bigger brush here so we don't spend all day on this. And get some of this ground color in here. Carry that across. There we go. We've got can't forget her tail here. We'll push that in as well. But let's just block in some of this ground here. And just like that. So now you can begin to see here, really see. Of course, we've got to do the dog and stuff here, but you can start to see how with the blocking in here, how this is going to work here. And how come you guys didn't tell me I just painted his pants in there? That's what that was. I painted in the wrong area. Yeah, that's, whoops. I wanted to see how many of you noticed I made a mistake there. So, right, I was doing the wrong area there. We put just a few marks to the other side there. This is going to be fun as I paint those edges and stuff and get that. I should have, while I had that color here, I should have just taken some of this toned Levi color here and just knocked in the other side there. Let's just gray that just a bit because it's away from the light side. So we'll add a little more violet and stuff and some burnt sienna here, which will gray it. And we'll use that just to emulate his pants on the other side. Now, it's a little different color than it's over there, so it's not a big deal. I just add some of that color into there. That's how you do to get that back and forth, and we could even start to shadow. The next, so this is the blocking in. The next step is going to be my light and shadow of the painting, and you know, we'll get even more definition and stuff like that in there with the light and shadow here. And there we go. Back like that, so that's working pretty good. And before I put him, I think I'll take some of this burnt sienna and blue, maybe a little violet and green. Those all make really neat, kind of darkish colors here. And we'll use that here. And I'm going to paint this dog really, what we call brush modeling, really casual, so that he carries a lot of interest, brush interest. And his tail he's kind of a bobtail here. But I like him. I really like him. And yeah, my dog, my lab that I used to ride on the beaches with him all the time, he came up several times up there on my horse. I've showed you several of the pictures of the horses I rode for years up on the Quasar, my white. Quasar loved him. He would just let him sit up onto the edge and we'd jump up onto the edge of the saddle like that, which was really a lot of fun. So let's drop some of this in. We'll have a good time here. Let's just make some dirty light color here. Like I said, we're going to really brush model him, what I call brush modeling on him, and have some fun. There we go. Long ways to go, but this is the blocking in, which is so important because this sets your painting. This gives you, the artist, your first look. A little bit of warmth color in there too, onto his face. And go back to this kind of light gray. Put just a bit of that in there. There we go. But I'll paint back and forth and do those edges and stuff. We'll have some fun with that. But a lot of times when I'm basing like this, I'll base into each other, cross the edges back and forth so that I don't paint specific edges. I'll put those in later. In other words, I don't want harsh edges, especially in a scene that's like this. I want to be able to control those edges, the color and the edges. Does that make sense? So let's just take, matter of fact, let's push this. We'll put a little extender in that. Let's go back to my 4 here for just a minute while that's wet. And as I start to build, especially as I start to build fur, I like the open medium. It gives a little thickness and a little transparency. Let's paint some, like we're going to give him light colors onto his fur here, onto his chest. But now we'll have more edges and more textures. We didn't want it on the mountains there. they're nice and soft. See how blurry and soft. And then, but up here, we're going to give it some texture and some edges because that's what's going to bring it forward. Does that make sense? So, yeah, let's push a little bit into his face. Here, there. And down his chest, he has 2 arms here. Maybe a little bit there. And we'll come down. Little wispy edges. We have to paint the grasses really before we can do some of his edges here. But let's just use it flat and add a bit to it. Some of the light little bits there. And light and dark. And so he's going to be one of the lightest and the darkest parts of our painting here. He has a lot of light dark on him. So he'll be, we'll push this light and dark real close to each other. Cool and warm there. Real close to each other. I'm going to push that a little bit more across here. I'll just use that nice edge there and push some of that white right there out of the way a bit. Burnt sienna, blue, red violet, little green here. It's all nice, real dark colors. Some of it, sometimes I let that fuzzy little stuff come here onto the edges of it, of him. He's going to be fun to paint. Let's just pull. But this is how I'm going to do it. Short, little choppy strokes of different colors that are going to paint his edges here. And we'll give just a little more touch right there into his nose. Mark here into his face. There. He has just a touch of lighter warmth up here on his head, right where the cowboys, giving him a nice job well done. Good day. Moving cows. Here we go. Yeah, he's going to be fun. I do like painting, kind of shaggy dogs and stuff. I love those. And we'll add some of that blue right in there. That edge, we'll bring that down a little further than what is here on him so he comes up against some of that blue. That would be kind of neat. And down over here is that stirrup in his foot right in there. So we'll let that show, but yeah. But I'm going to, so this kind of mark, the way in which I'm painting this is I'm going to do this dog again with this same kind of thing. But see how by doing that a few times you get this modeling through there. And so I see this lighter, maybe a little yellow, burnt sienna kind of coloring right in there. And I'll put a couple marks of it. And then I move it. So I'll move it around into a couple of other areas. And it's really kind of a color that's breaking between the light and the dark. And so it's a nice tone to use to break up some of that. But then I'll reset my darks and my lights again. But there's some we have to, before we get too wild and crazy with this dog, we have to get some of our ground in here so our fur can set up. See that? We want this line right here. Here it's indistinct. Here we want this a little bit more distinct because that's going to bring him forward, right? So we're going to need some of that light value. Let me just show you. Going to need some of that light value. So that light value, so the light grass is going to play up against him right in here. And that light grass and a little bit of yellow into that is going to be very important to help bring and set this area right here even farther forward. Do you see that right there? Right? And so that's what's going to bring him forward. Now, we'll use some of the other grasses here, some of the other colors to model up in there and stuff, but we'll need some of these lights and darks. It's all part of the planning of the painting, what I call the, we're testing our colors, we're planning our colors, planning the painting that we're going to do here. And that'll work. And just likewise, I want a little bit of this dark burnt sienna blue, little green here, some of that dark right up in here. That's going to be the darks between the prairie grass, because that's going to help him sit, even though you don't see it right here, it's going to help him set down and create the shadows and stuff, and also establish the depth. So we'll work some of this into this and let it fade away as it goes back. But dark colors advance, light colors recede, and then those light colors become more like the sky as they go back. So this is what's going to bring it way forward, and that is what's going to set it way back. Does that make sense? And it's a lot of fun. Once you can see this kind of stuff in your painting as an artist, it took me a while to see it and understand it, but then going out there, and out here in Nebraska, boy, I've been out here in Nebraska now for 10 years, coming out here, then living full-time out here for the last 5 years maybe, and I see things so much different out here. Because you look out over the plains, you're looking at dozens of miles out there, and you see this out there every day. So it's easier for me to paint it. Now, look at how much darker that dried. That's drying up there. It's getting really, really close. I could have a sharper line on that, but let's see how we develop this painting in here first, whether or not we need to do something like that. But let's put just a little bit of that atmosphere into this blue right back here. Just a bit of that. So that's the atmosphere. Just a bit of that. That sets that right back there. That's pretty nice. It's not quite as dark as it is over there, but it does its job. And so you can see it doesn't have to be exactly perfect. Let's get my blue and my burnt sienna, a little bit of our red violet here, and let's add that darker mark here for her tail. We'll just whisper that a bit for right now, just so we don't forget that tail. I have been known to forget that. And some of you have let me know that I forgot it. That's okay. Yeah, but I try to remember before I varnish. Put their tails on. Yeah, that works. And let's just block in some of the rest of this, and then we'll call that for this video before we run out of time. And then we'll go over and start our painting for dimension and the details and stuff like that. So let's continue with the block in. So we'll take let me go to the 4. So I'm using really a 4 and a 10 and a 3/4 inch. Just, oops, that's got some gray in it. Rinse that out. When I rinse that brush, always poke it into a little extender. Let's go burnt sienna and some white. Just a real simple face color for him. We'll paint him with more detail and stuff in the next video. We'll add a bit there for his hands. And we'll do this one into his hands here. Right there like that. Or should we make this one video? That's why, and I wish you guys would leave me a comment. Do you like the one big long video, or do you like a couple videos? That's, I never know, I've done both, and, You know, but it's really hard sometimes. No one tells me what you really like. Let's just add a bit up over here. Back into him. Here. And let's just add a little bit more burnt sienna back here. Shadow that. Shadow that part back right there. And let's, see, he's got that aqua shirt, and it's subtle and it's gray, but it's I want to give him a little darker one, but he can go a little lighter, I think. So let's go with a little bit more gray, maybe some of that sky color in there. Here. Yeah, we'll build these grays here. Right in there. Get rid of some of these lights. And so just a little bit of the beiges and blues here. Some of these grays here. And that gray would really help pop his face off here. Sets that shadow there. We'll paint the, the cuffs and the shirt wrinkles and all that kind of stuff here. After we get some of the blocked in for light and dark, light and shadow. Let's take a bit of that shadow, that color. There. Here we go. Maybe just an idea of the light. Yeah, that kind of, so that gray is going to be kind of nice. But back here, I do like slightly darker. So let's just darken him up a little bit. Some extender. If it's a little too brown, just a touch more blue. That's going to be too dark. So a little lighter. Let's add just a touch of that violet in there. That's a nice color. Yeah, we'll keep him really simple. There, yeah, that's kind of nice. Let's lighten that up a bit. Give him just a light little bit on that hat. And again, we'll keep it kind of simple. There. Blur those edges out. I'll do more finite detail, but this brush is it's really old and wonky and doesn't really have an edge on it, so it's kind of hard to get some of that in there. Just a bit of that. There we go. And yeah, then we'll just kind of do a little bit of blocking in. This will be a saddle area here, saddle horn. We'll have a touch of the real light flesh I forgot on his hands there. But we're going to do a lot more. But that's basically how I, start thinking through, walking through. Let's give this girth strap a little light color. But I'm just thinking through the colors here. Ooh, we've got a long ways to go, but boy, an hour and a half, we got a lot done. Not quite an hour and a half, but we got a lot done on them here. Setting some of that in there. But at least it's kind of setting. You can see I need to do some more, little more crisping up work on the horse and stuff here. So we'll do that. So the horse can actually get a little more light dark on it. because this other horse is going to be so much. So it all depends on what we do on this horse. So this shadow does not appear as dark as that shadow. So I'm real close right there, but I'm safe, I think. Still kind of safe. We'll push that through light right here. A little bit of light right there. Coming through. Right on that. So we'll get all of that worked up. But that's getting everything there, I think. Right here. A little bit more right there. In towards that eye just a bit. This is still wet. That's what adding that extender does. Still makes that wet. I really want to paint that horse. I love painting the horses now, so really want to get in there and paint that horse. Let's get just a little bit of this gray here. And sketch. So a lot of times on small, or I work a small brush like this, and I work it more like I'm sketching with it, drawing with it, sketching with it. Like if you wanted to put a line for that shadow, for the saddle there, I kind of like draw it in, sketch it in, and that works really, really well. So I'm going to rinse that color here for a second. We'll go back to our sky. A little bit of that color here. Let's just push a bit of that in. Clean up around the guy a little bit. Just take some of that out. And then we'll put some detail in there. But yeah, if this feels too smooth, add a few more little marks into it. But I think mine's okay, I think. I don't mind that too much. You could, I was thinking, boy, when I did this, you could put a few cows back here too. But, which would actually be kind of nice if you wanted to do that. Maybe we'll look at that towards the end of the painting and see if we need something here. Taking some of his colors of his shirt and stuff and adding it into the grass. Again, I'm always looking for ways to carry and do color. Now, okay, so that's got that pretty much in there. I could have a little bit more of the dark right up in here. That works pretty good. Here like that. Good, that works pretty good. So now that's got that all blocked in like that. Now, it's been an hour and a half. I'm going to go get a cup of coffee. and I'll change out, because I've got 20 minutes left there, but I'm going to change out the video as well. And then it'll be only 10 seconds for you, but I'll come back and we'll paint for some light and shadow onto the horse and onto the cowboy and stuff, set them, and then we'll move that back through here. But and I'll take a picture of this for those of you in the membership, as this is where we are on the blocking in, okay? So, yeah, and I'm going to let this dry up just a little bit before I start the next level. That's one of the things I love about acrylics. I let that dry up so that I can work on the next and not really disturb my light and shadow, the blocking in that I had there. And I want to see just how much those dry down. Is it going to dry down enough? I like it right now, but is it going to dry down enough? We'll see. All right? Okay, so I'll see you in just a second. Hi everyone, welcome back. Okay, had a little lunch. It's been 2 hours, but this is the thing. Remember I mixed all this up when I did the sky. So I've had a 2-hour lunch. We did about an hour and 20 minutes of filming. Look at this. This is all still wet here. That's what, if you make sure you add that extender into your paint and you mix it up, it will stay wet. When you thin it out and put it across the board, it will dry. So this is still, well, I'm going to take that back. This is still a little tacky here on there. That's 3 hours. that's there. So, with the modern acrylics, when you start using them like this, you can really slow them dry, but you have to make sure you mix in some stuff like it, okay? All right, so what I'm going to do now is, so I've got that blocked in, and I just came in and just put a little bit of dark on him here while I was waiting to set up and get going here again. And I want to come in and I want to paint the front part of the horse here and some of the guy. We've done this, on so many other videos. We're going to follow the same type of techniques. We're going to start shadows to lights, halftones, and then we're going to repeat and a couple of times. Then after we repeat and we get the shadows and lights and some of those halftones till we get what we like, then we do broken color. And broken color is using the same type of value in that area, but varying the tone slightly. Kind of like what I did here. See on his pants, he's got all these beautiful tones carrying some of that. So we'll concentrate on doing some of that, okay? So I want to come in and I want to work on the horse first. So I'm going to take like a number 6 here, 6 or an 8 or something like that, so I can get some movement. And this is all still wet. Now, you can see it's still wet, but I could take, I'm just going to use it right in here with some extender, maybe a little open medium into this too. I like extender and open medium together if I want to work an area for a while. Let's add a little bit of like Diarylide to it. See how that pumps up the lightness of it. Now, I will add a bit of white over here. I already started some of the shadows there, so I want to build some of the lights down this side of her neck here, and we have to decide if we're going to push her mane back up over to this side. So I'll put on the light stroke, right? And so this is my dark and this is my light. So I'm going to use mostly a halftone here, maybe a little gray to burnt sienna, so a little green in it. See how it grays it down? And I will use some that, then maybe I'll slide over here to a little bit of that light and I'll make a mark there. See how that softens it and almost like blends it. I don't want to get it too blended, but look at also where my hand is on my brush. It's way back here. That keeps the tip of the brush very light, and I can manipulate it. Sometimes, and I'm going to get there, I don't always do it, but I love to take like the knife and just take some of those colors and pick that up and work those right into the, see some of the modeling you get with the knife? I love painting beaches and everything with the knife, and then I can come back in and work and manipulate some of that color. Put in some halftones here, halftone darks here, but that just puts on a modeling of the color there, and I can build on that. Let's go back and build a little light here. I'll build a bit more yellow and light, and I get thicker. I'm slowly drying to in all of my paintings now, getting more and more thick with my paintings. But this big shoulder muscle is really neat, and I want to build that up. And I'm going to do this several times. But in doing that, we're going to follow some of the contours. I see that little halftone shadow right back in there. Now, some of you, I forgot to mention it in the beginning. When I did the original photo of this, and I got it from, she is looking the other way, and I decided to move her more towards, so I just moved her head over, just in Photoshop, just moved her head over. I just love doing that, and seeing some different angles and looks and stuff like that. So I did that, and I liked it turned, but you could also use it the other way too. Let's gray just a bit, slightly different, a little more burnt sienna into that, and we'll push in some of those other, and that just gives the highs and lows. You can see it starts to really build her up. We have some of the chest muscle, so I look for the shadow and the light. Shadows, burnt sienna, blue, little bit of the violets. Let's set the shadows back up over here. Yes, it's going to hit some of that wet over there, and it's not going to bother me here. I love the variations of tones anyway. So let's just put, because we've got that girth strap here, and I love to push. This is still wet from earlier here, so I'll push that in there. A little bit right in there, and I vary the tones. So that would be a half tone is right in between, and then a broken color would be to take some, like maybe some of this warmer burnt sienna and push it in there, and so that breaks up some of that area. So we had that blue from earlier, and then some of the other color. That's called the half tone and the broken color. Broken color means you're using about the same values and stuff, but you're getting a slightly different tone. Cool tone, warm tone. Let's take a little shadow. Finish that muscle up there like that. That one comes down right there. They have that big muscle right up there. Pull this one down through. And I like these tones when I do this and I'm working up into the chest. I like the tones, like here, they're mostly dark, but I like them to vary just a little bit because that gives that beautiful look. And I always mix. So let's mix a little bit more, maybe a little open medium. We'll keep it workable for a long time. Not that I love to mix. I'm a tone painter, and so it doesn't bother me to mix. But just in case you want to keep that tone around a while, let's build this back up here. Maybe not quite that light here. So I'm building some areas of the tones here. And then a half tone right in between the two. I'll just take the two together and I'll stroke that half tone. Let's see that half tone, a little grayer there. I can soften it a little bit more coming into that shadow there. A little bit of that coming right up here into right in there. That's just so pretty. You get all those colors going in there. And some of this around. Here, that works. I just love those colors. And sometimes, you know, it just takes you a while to get some of those colors up there like that. To get it built up enough. This is her shoulder, and it's showing up lighter than where that neck is. Because the neck is in complete shadow, but some of the light is coming down there. So we get a little bit of light there. And then we'll take some of this grayness right here for that. For her neck shadow. See, I love that gray. See, slightly a different color there. And then I'll work some of the deep colors as well, the deep shadows. When I do use shadows, though, I do like extender. So I like that extender in those so that those shadows stay a little more transparent and less power to them. And we can go to a real dark violet, sometimes a little green, into that to really develop that shadow. And I really want to develop that. That'll push her head forward right there. There. That's nice right in there. And we'll let that. That's a little dark, too far up. So we'll just take a bit of burnt sienna and stuff in it and run it right through it. Leave some of that other color there. And if you don't like, you know, the Heritage is non-toxic like I've told you all. And so I don't mind touching it and stuff. But some people, you know, might have an allergic reaction or you're afraid to touch it. Just use a second brush, that's all. And use a second brush if you're ever painting in oils. You don't want to touch your oils. So here, we'll push that back in there. There like that. Let's put a little bit of light up onto the tip of her ear here. So this is what I'm going to do, and I'm going to do the same thing over here. But what did we do? How did we make it different? We added the atmospheric colors, some of that color that's right there that's still wet, right? We added some of that right in there. So this is hitting more onto that shadow side there. Right there. We'll drop that right down. That side there. We'll put some of our mane and stuff there. Let's go just a little more burnt sienna here on the roundness. They have this big flat area on the side of their cheek. And I just like to pull down and emulate that flat area there. Yeah, we go. I'm getting a little better at the horses. Sometimes I'll mess up, but I really like painting them. And so let's do pushing this nostril kind of curved right there. And the other side is just a little bit showing up over there. Like that, kind of grayed. So let me just take this over here, grade this up a bit. Here, a little more violet and burnt sienna. Here, gray this up, not quite that dark. We'll gray up. And this is where you can see I have it over here on the big monitor. And I like that big monitor because the photos, when you print them out, don't even show absolutely everything. This shows a tremendous more amount of color. And so you really see those grays on it, on her, right here when you look at it on the monitor. And you see some of those darks right there, how they really form down here by how the nose and brings in that opening to her mouth there, how that really forms. And so it's quite different than what you might imagine seeing in the printed photo. And sometimes I just kind of go right between the two, but use both and kind of make something in between the two. But on her, I'm going to work on her a couple times so I can get some nice definition, because her face is one of the most forward things in the painting. So I'm going to work on her a bit and work on those. She has, like here, what I call architectural interest here. This side that bends down, and then her nose is going to come in there. So we're going to want to get some of the architecture of her a little bit better. So we'll put some of this light right up following the nose outline right there. Coming up right, work that right into the gray. Some of this right down in here. Some of that, see some of this little gray tone I'll bring in, and then I'll shadow it back a bit. And working it back and forth. The tones, working the different tones, that's what really makes them nice looking here. So, there. And so I'll work that, but I'll do this, I'll work on her a few times here to get the structure. So shadows were the shadows, so there's a little bit of shadow back there, and I'll mix it again here. Slightly different. Mix it again here, get that socket of that eye. Here's some of that structure, looking for that structure. And that lighter little pull down right here that sets the side of her face. And if it starts to tack up a little bit, that's where I had the open medium and the extender. If it starts to tack up a little bit, just add a little more extender. A little more of the loose medium will loosen it back up again. So, and we'll take this. This would actually make beautiful grays as well, slightly different. Get some of that blue in there. Put in a little open medium here. Let's push some of that gray in here. Right down her nose. There. This is a little too far of a mark in, so I'll work on her anatomy here a little bit. But this is what I'm going to do. It just curves in just a bit like that. There, that's better. That is better. And you know, get some of this little bits here. I like that. And a little lighter gray. And then so I'll put on some of that light gray, and I'll put on some medium tone right in between there, little half tones, marks, but kind of follow, so her forehead here goes flat, so I kind of follow the flattening out of her forehead here. There, like that. See? So you're building the shape and dimension. Now there's that light that's actually coming on the other side over here. So just that, don't try not to breathe. Get a little bit of gray maybe over her eye there. There we go, a little bit of that light and roundness over that eye here. I'm just gonna clean my brush here for a second. I have a smaller number 2 filbert, which I love to do detail with, and I really need to use that on her. So I'll take a little bit of my reds and blues here, maybe a bit of those violets, nice dark colors here, and I'll use this to shape up that oval. Her eye is more of an oval here. Shape up that little bit over there. That's better. And so I'll look, and you know, that's a nice thing about the big one there, is you can see these little details. So there's little details of light, and this is what I'm going to concentrate on. Little details of light here. And we have just a little bit of that light and a gray color here that just eclipse her eye just a bit here across the top. Sets that in. And the shadow up there. I'm going to put, like I said, a lot in here because her face is the most forward part of it here. So I'll work right on her face. But that's how I do it. Now see all the colors that you're building in there. And you just keep building and you keep building. Of course, we've got her bridle and stuff to put on. But that's what I'm going to do, is just to keep building and building like that. So I'll show you a few more areas here of how I'm going to build it. And then I'm just going to go build it, because you don't need to just watch me paint all this little stuff. You'll be able to see with how it changes in the next step photo how I do this. But I'm just looking, and especially looking back at the big one there, where all my shadows and lights are, and making sure. So I'll get a little more shadow in here, right into this bridge right here. A little bit pulling down. Pull the right angle, because that flattens out the front of her face there. So make sure you pull the right angle and stuff. And so you'll see, like right here, see the little bit of light, Those are very important, because that little bit of light brings that structure further out towards the light. So, you know, pay some very close attention to where the lights are, where that light is hitting, because we paint structure in portraits with light and shadow. You know, in a rose, we paint it with petals, you know, and stuff, and the angles and stuff of those petals. But in portraits and stuff, we paint it with light and shadow. That gives the dimensions to it. So we want to make sure we get these lights and shadows right where they belong, and some of the angles a little bit this way. That brings that face right there like that. And yeah, a little bit right up above her eye there, and down this way, right like that. So you can see it's building the roundness and stuff of her face. So, and those marks are so important. And we'll do that all the way through her body and in through him as well. Let me show you in through him. So, and the small brush here works just really well here for this. Let's just take a little burnt sienna, maybe a little bit of our gray color, so it softens it out. A little bit of extender here. I'm going to push that in. Now that's a little dark, so I'm going to gray this up, lighten this up and gray it. A little bit of extender. Now, why extender rather than open medium? Because I'm adjusting just a small area, and I just need a little bit of loose paint. I don't need a lot of, so I use the open medium when I've got a lot of things to do in a big wide area. Does that make sense? So a little bit here, pull back. We'll make sure we get some of that shadow in there. Here. There we go, just like that. And we'll take, and we'll add a little bit of the, let's come over here, the reds, the yellows, all of our yellows into some of that red, and some light here. This makes a real warm kind of a flesh color. And you can see there on the flesh color there, he's real warm to the front. Now, you could use some extender or some open medium. Both will work in this, but it's a small area, so I'm just going to stick to some extender right now. There, like that. So I get that warmth. And when I create that warmth, I'll go ahead and touch it into a few other areas. You know, just not too much back there, just to say we did it. Right, and then I'll push that light in. So I paint everything for structure, light and shadow first. Then I go back and we'll add his ears, some hair, some stuff like that. But I get this light and shadow, and his nose up here has just a touch of light on it, but it's mostly going to be painted with the shadow here. Let's walk this back around this collar a little bit here. Here we go. There, just like that. Okay. So what you see that, and you know, in portraits we would actually, so this is why it's really nice. In portraits we would slide just a little bit redder into the cheek area, and we would blush just a little bit of redness into that cheek area, right? And then, like, burnt sienna is a really good, like, structure color for getting some of the structure here on the ear. Now, in a portrait, we would go with a cooler, darker shadow color into, like, the ear, like a red violet or so. At least Sargent does that. He always says that. Put a little bit of that in there. There, like that. I'm going to warm that up just a bit. I'm not going to, you know, I'm painting the impression of him, but I want to do a pretty good job here. So I'll do it a couple times maybe. But here, a little bit there, and some burnt sienna modeled in here. I'll show you, he has a little like wrinkle on his face, modeled in right in here to keep that structure of his face, his facial features here, just kind of simplistic here. There. A little bit of that light red. Soften that a bit. A little bit of that burnt sienna again. Right back up here into that nose. There. Maybe just a touch more. And again, I'll work this a couple times, but, you know, because I don't try to get it once. I work it a couple times here. And bit of that. We'll get this right up here. A little bit of that softened into that edge there. And if I got his nose a little too pointy, which I kind of do, I'll paint it back with the shadow color, see? A little bit of that gray here into the side, especially me. I have a little bit of gray, so it's okay to have a little bit of gray. Let's just push a little bit there. There we go. And more of a triangle shape with that burnt sienna here, soft. Maybe a little bit of extender into that, thin it out, a little drawing with it, but more of a like a little triangle shape right here to form his eye socket. And I'll push that in. We'll touch a little burnt sienna, a little bit of blue, darken it down here. Touch a bit into that. But again, it's the impression. I'm painting the impression here. Just the impression. So I don't like to make just like real lines yet because that just doesn't look as natural. So I'll set those areas in and then I'll come back and work them and soften them. Work other colors right up to them and in them to soften them, to kind of set those features in. And then I'll repeat it. And I'll repeat it again. Set those in. That's good. And usually a couple times here. So I'm going to bring that neck color back here again. Bring some of that out a little further. And you start just modeling him up with some of those colors. And let's push a little bit of that pinky into his cheek again, so you go back and forth with that. And so I'll let that kind of dry up, and then I'll go back in again and make small little adjustments, not big movements, small little adjustments. And there's some little things. So now you got the shadow is right down into this part of his face here, see? But there's areas of light that I still don't have. And so I'll go back and look for those light marks, just like on the horse's face. I'll go back and look for those light marks, which will start to give the shape and stuff to his entire face and structure here that I want to have. And a little bit of extender into some of those reds and stuff. There we go. There. Yeah. A little more softening and work that has to be done in there, but I'll do it again. And I'll keep doing it until I get it the way that I want it. Usually takes me 2-3 times. Kind of going around. And softly, let's put just a bit of that shadow right there onto his collar, right where that is. Yeah, and same up here with the brown onto the hat, a little burnt sienna, and some blue, maybe some green into that. Let's look to that shadow right here, right? A little bit to the shadow on the inside here, the crease, the top crown of his hat there. And some nice medium beige in there. Beautiful light color there as well. There. And I'll do a few times, like that medium beige, maybe a little medium white here. Hit just some of the light shine areas. we see there. Bring that hat up. He has a real light little hat band here. And that disappears right in there. Yeah. A little bit of shadow right along the edge of it. So I try to, if I see it, I try to sneak it in there. And I'll do it a few times. I'm not going to show you all the times that I'll do it, but I just do this and I repeat it again and again and again, and each time refining it a little bit more. So I don't try to get it all perfect and refined in one move. It takes several moves to do it, if that makes sense. Okay. There we go. And a little bit of that light here. Just a bit of it. There. So do that. So you just get this idea here. And we'll get that dark. So we'll get our burnt sienna and blue. This little bit of violet here. This nice dark. We'll put this fold on here. Goes right like that. And I'll break up some of that color. Now, on the photo there, just looking at the big one there, it looks all about the same, but sometimes I'll just break that up with like maybe a little burnt sienna, a little warmer color, because that's overall. And then that secondary color is like the broken color, see? It's like the broken color. It's a good color, a good thing to do. Here, let's put just a little bit of that shadow right there. Seeing that this gives a nice looking hat, a little more, maybe a perfect edge here. I'll thin this out. Let's get just a bit more of a perfect edge here, because that's what's bringing this hat off of that and really quite far forward. So you can see that darker little perfect edge there. We'll move it into some of these browns. Just move that down, right down in there. And that's good. Maybe just and see, as I start to refine, my eye gets smaller, and I see just the tiniest little bit there of that dark coming right here. Stop it there at that crown. And this around just a bit like that. That's nice. That looks pretty good. Maybe some of that lighter burnt sienna right in there. Just a little touch of that color. Now, this is beautiful area that I'll be, I'll put in some of the blues, like from the sky and stuff later on. So let me just show you. Like, I might come right in here and hit some of that blue, maybe right in here. Hit a little bit of that blue from and it creates that almost like a reflected light, but it carries some of that color from the sky back up there. Maybe, and you can see like where reflected light is, like some right in here. And we can just hit a little light of it right there like that. And that works. And see, as you build that hat, then all of a sudden his face starts to look a little better, And so, one of the things that we get all so wrapped up in is working into an area, and it's got to be perfect. And so, we go back and forth, back and forth, back and forth. When what we should do is just work it and move on, right? Move on to that area. So now you've seen me do shirts and stuff like that 100 times. I'm not going to use the small brush. I'm going to go slightly bigger to like my number 6. here. And we'll grab some of our blues and some of these grays. Beautiful grays I like from reds and blues and burnt siennas and them. Maybe some of our sky color into this beautiful gray here. All right, a little more blue. I like my grays to be slightly blue. So I want this slightly blue, maybe a little blue violet here. So we'll grab a little violet. We'll gray this up a little open medium. That's kind of a pretty purpley shirt. Maybe too purpley. A little more burnt sienna, which will gray it a bit more. Blue. Too much purple. Too much. We'll get, that's good color right there. I like that one. And this is what I'll use as my base here. So, you know, for starting to work his shirt and stuff here. So I'll work some of my base, my shadows, and my lights. So let's just grab that color, drop right down over here, and hit it with some of these lights so you can see where the light is on his shirt here. So basically, I still look onto his shirt that we have there in our photo reference for light and shadow, but I've changed the base colors so that it changes a bit here. So right up through here, and I could, and I should be, doing this more shadow first, so I'll flip over and start that as well. Here, but we're just, and so the other gray I used earlier is slightly different. I don't want to paint all of that out. That's good broken color. Does that make sense? It's good broken color. So just add some of this in there right now, but don't paint it all out. This is good broken color. So there we go. Now let's darken that down again, a little more blue and violet here, maybe a bit of red in it, bit of green and burnt sienna. We'll gray it up a bit. It's kind of nice. Let's get that deeper shadow in there. That's neat. So this is what I'm gonna do. Working on this. Here. Like that. Let's get that shadow. This will help pop his face here. Get that in there. Some of that pulled down. Great. Just, you follow the same kind of shirt wrinkles and stuff. And it's real dark and stuff on the bottom here. Right along those edges. And then a little bit onto the cuff there. Put a little darker right in there. There we go. Bit of that up in here. There. Some of that blue. And I'll leave, sometimes I leave the more, I want to say it, you know, let's grab some of this, more of the mark. So, you know, it's not blended out. So it makes it look more like, you know, wrinkles and stuff like that into the fabric. So we'll grab a little light wrinkle there. Here. And this is basically how I do a lot of you've seen me do this before. I do a lot of drawing with the dark and then relate the other colors to it. Here. There we go. And maybe a little heavier in that violet right on that side because that's the shadow side. And we'll work a little bit of these. So if I get all of this in, if I want to shape it back up more of that violet or blue or lighter, I just add a stroke or two. You don't, because you've got the base colors already there. Does that make sense? So you just adding some colors, and so it isn't like a shadow and a light of one color. A shirt and stuff like that will carry multiple colors to it, and so you may put many colors in it. And I will onto this. I will touch into some of my browns and put them up there onto his shirt. So those will be pretty. I want this lighter right up there, so I'm going to go quite a bit lighter here. Because that's the real light side right there of his shirt. So I want that even lighter yet. You can see in that photo, this is really light yet. So here. And textures and stuff like that are all okay there. That's all okay because this is forward in our painting. We didn't have any of this in our mountains, right? But we can have it here. So I'll work this a bit. Well, this is what I'll do, and I'll work his pants and stuff the same way. Taking the shadow first, then the mid-tones and the darks, and work those. I'm going to put a little bit of light right in here. That's really going to help his face. There. Get that nice big light. There's a big light fold right there, so we'll get that in here. And some of the light right in there. And then I'll come back and work some of the other tone with the dark tones here. There, like that, and a little bit of light. Back and forth a few times, and it starts to look like little wrinkles and stuff. And then I'm going to go over to the other cowboy there, do the same thing. I'm going to work through the horse, through all of this, and then I'm going to put him in the same way. And then we'll come back and I'll show you the saddles, some details and stuff like that. But I'll show a few clips like I normally do along the way, so you don't have to sit there and watch me work this again and again and again. So you get the idea. You get the idea how it's going to go. And, I took this too far down. I need to create that shoulder right there. There we go. And we'll do that, and I'll be back, okay? So I'm going to paint on this for a little bit. It'll take me probably about 30 minutes to do all this, okay? And then I'll be back, and we'll see how it goes, all right? All right, see ya. Everyone, welcome back. Okay, it's the next morning. I worked on that a little bit, and then life gets in the way. So I decided to stop for the evening, and then I just coming back to it today. A lot of people always ask me if I'm doing that, do I get rid of my colors or anything? No, I usually don't. Matter of fact, I have the other palette over there. I have a couple palettes that I work at a time, and what I do is. If you try to hold these kind of multimedia palettes up overnight and stuff, they start to wrinkle and stuff. So I don't. I save the palette, and then in the morning I transfer it to a new sheet. So that's what I did. Transferred all my colors this morning to a new sheet. I needed a couple of new ones here anyway. And then this is the same open medium, and I transferred what was left of my sky color and stuff there. And what I do when I'm going to save colors overnight is I just use a little mister bottle, and I mist them. I just mist the colors lightly, and then I use any kind of plastic lid that's going to fit over the colors. And what I do is I go in and I mist inside of the lid. Now what this does is it makes a real moist environment, and then I just set it up over the colors like that, and they're fine. And in the morning when you get there, they're just all fine. So these are all, these have been out. These are the colors. It is now 3 o'clock in the afternoon on the next day. So I painted with these yesterday and then just misted them and saved them. And now we're at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm going to go finish this painting up. But you can keep them for a long time when you do that. And especially if you use a real fine mister bottle like this, because what comes out of the colors first is water, and this just replaces that. And if you've got a little skin on it, if you mist it and cover it up, it'll come back and reconstitute. Okay, so let's get going on this. Let's get back into this. So what I did yesterday, and I showed you with some of that, and then I added another layer, taking this guy closer to this guy over here. This guy I still wanted to push back a little bit, so I wanted this guy to be back just a little bit further. And so I just used all the same colors, but I add into that color, what I do is I add in a little bit of the sky color. So if my forward horse is, a burnt sienna area, what I do with this is I'll take this burnt sienna and a little bit of the sky color here, which makes it more atmospheric here. So that becomes the color that I come over here and I start to use for the lights and stuff here onto this horse here. And it takes it that way. Now, the other way I've showed you in other Westerns that I do it is I can put on a light coat of extender when this is real dry and then just glaze a little color over this. So I feel that he is maybe a little bit close. He is a little bit better as far as the colors for pushing it back. Depends on how much space I want to make in here. So I could, though, I could go through one more time and add a few more darks depending upon how much I'm going to add to that guy. Does that make sense? It's a balance that I'm going to do. So he will be one of the last things that I paint into position after I get this guy in here. So I added a little bit of this color back into him. I added a little bit of that color back into here a little bit, just working through again. And I lightened up more so than what you see here on this horse. I lightened up this front shoulder because I really wanted it to come forward a bit more. So a little bit more work. So let's get back into it. So I'm going to take a number 6, a 4 or 6 or so flat here, and I'm going to make a kind of tan, kind of gray kind of color here that I'll use for this front front chest strap here that comes on this way here. These keep like when you're riding, and especially if you're going up hills, down hills, keeps the saddle from going, or if you're doing a lot of running, chasing, keeps the saddle from sliding back on the horse. So I'm just going to make a color that's going to show up nice here. And this is, first let's come in here, maybe take a small little round and some medium white, a touch of any kind of silver is slightly bluish, a little gray here, medium white here. And let's just come in and we'll just position the top part of that here. There we go. That's going to go right about in there. And then the two bottoms of it get just a little mark here, here. That'll give me my nice target right in there. And we'll just leave that little brush there for a bit. And so I'm going to come right back up here by the joint this way and just swoop a line down. Right down into there. Just like that. And color didn't move very well, so it needs to be just a little bit wetter. So a little bit of extender into it right there. And let's bring this up over from here, right about there. And down, right into there. And then we'll bring this down with this, and we'll put a strap, we'll dangle it a little bit here, right in there, so that will put that in. Now we'll come in and do a little more decoration, a little bit of darker colors. We'll do lights and darks, a little blue, burnt sienna, we'll widen it out. You know, this is on this horse here now, this is, you know, we can afford to do, you know, a lot of Westerns. I don't do that much with it. I just kind of simply do it. But he's up front here. So if we wanted to, you know, put some more stuff here. Now, do you go do the stitching and all that? No, I'm not going to do that. But, you know, I'll maybe put a cast shadow up underneath that here. Use just the chisel of the brush here. And just draw a little cast shadow line here. Just not a perfect line, just a little bit there to help pop that off. Maybe a little bit up over here. Some of that coming right up over here. Some of the little bit of light and shadow work on it and stuff. That's what we'll do. We'll pull some maybe additional light here. Highlight colors. And I'll probably do this a couple times. Here, highlight, shadow, pop it off, a little bit of interest. We'll hit it with a bit of that blue here. That'll give it some interest here. A bit of that bluish color, which is a beautiful color because it's kind of like a light shimmer on it, you know, like the light hits on it. And I'll go back and forth. Sometimes I'll pull across just for some interest here. Pull across like that so it gets a little bit more interest. So not all of your marks are moving in the same direction. And that, especially like when you paint leather and stuff like that, it gives it a much, you know, better look to it. Take a little bit of dark here. Push that back. And then you can touch in a white, just a tiny, not pure white, just a tiny bit of a shine there. Here like that to kind of set that. Now, there's other buckles and stuff that got on. Mine had it here too that you can just emulate a little bit there. You know, and you can drop this down. It's just because he is so far forward here, you know, I mean, you can drop in the idea of another buckle or something to go on there just because it's so far forward and it's right where we could, and he's pretty large. I mean, he's not by any manner of means the largest horse I've ever painted, but you know, you can just touch in, and I keep it simple because I'm an impressionistic painter, so I'll just keep it kind of simple here. And there would be, coming off of the saddle right here, there would be, it'll come right in here and drop down into that buckle right there. That'll work out pretty nice. But we can do, take a smaller brush here and do some work. So some of the decorative work that's on the saddle, maybe a few straps, maybe a few conches if you want, conchos, I guess. You will put a few little marks and stuff in there. I wanted to build back up the top of the saddle here again, right like that. And put a bit into that there. Some yellows, and what I do is I make the mark several times, and I try to vary. vary the colors that are in my brush so I get a wonderful look, different colors and stuff coming off there. Here. But, a lot of times when you see me do the decorative or the final workings of these colors and details, you see me just making marks and straps, especially on the saddle. Put out some of the leather straps and danglies and stuff like that come out through here. You don't, just marks. See, like just breaking that up. It just breaks up a solid area color that I put on yesterday. And, here for the edge of the saddle, here. And a lot of times I'll just drag the brush like this so I get this fracturing of color. You see me do this a lot. So that fracturing of color, maybe a little bit more yellow into that to hit some of that, a little bit more of that burnt sienna. And it's really nice painting with that. When I mist those colors, I try not to mist them too heavy so that I get this, the color is really thick, if that makes sense. And I love that for final details of the painting. Thick colors, because I can always thin them out. Does that make sense? I can always add a little water, thin them out, and I get those details really nice here. So, and it's just, but I don't, I have the small liner brush and stuff, but the liner brush, like when you look at that, makes it absolutely perfect. And I don't always really like that real perfect liner brush. Let's get the stirrup on here. A nice tan brown light, model this color up here, maybe a bit of yellow. So when I model it, it's just like this, okay? So that's not going to be so when I go pick up this color, it's not going to be like solid. It'll be pretty close here on this one, but won't be like solid. And we're going to put that edge right up here, and it'll round gently right here, coming down underneath here, and that's into the light side. Into the shadow side here, we'll grab a little bit of burnt sienna, some of that blue. We'll drop a little more shadow tone up onto this side. And we might just paint the edge of it here. So you can have a flat side and then a side of it right there. And maybe a bit of yellow into that, bit more. Hit this side here a bit more. That's it. Maybe you could see in the photo, it gets kind of a light shine. That one looks like almost like it's a leather wrapped wood. They could be metal or leather wrapped wood. A lot of different variations. I have many of them. We'll put a little horse color back in there. And thin that out, and then a little more shadow here. And a good impressionist you're not going to copy it all exact. We're just going to put the impression of it there. That's all we really need. I want this light edge a bit more here. But a bit of that blue shining in there looks kind of neat. And let's go with a little bit more gray for the bottom of his. Forgot to turn off my phone. So I have done that now in the last several videos. Sorry about that, guys. I just forgot about turning off that phone here. We'll put a gray right here, right for a second, and we'll put a little bit of a lighter color right up on top for the top of his boot here, and maybe a bit of the dark here, just to, you can use it almost like to help separate some of it, or do a little drawing. It's like I tell you in a lot of things, I'll do a lot of drawing with dark colors, and then I'll use light colors and maybe break the edges of it a little bit, but I'll use that dark to kind of just set that in there first. There we go, for a little bit of his idea of his boot. There, let's intensify or darken that shadow up at the top up here, right up in here. See, and that this gives the impression of that, and then we'll put the actual leather part of the stirrup coming down here off of the saddle. It would be darker. I'll start out with this slightly lighter color. Then we'll put some dark into it here. Maybe a bit of that, more of that orangey kind of color into it. Kind of neat little bit of light here. Right up like that. Here we go. And that actually, bends around here like this. If underneath the stirrup grabs that, but that's a lot of detail. Maybe on a bigger horse I could fit some of that in there, but at the very bare minimum, what I'll do is just take a little dark and do a little bit of like outlining work. That's how they go together. And that's all I need to do on that one. But in the photo, you'll see maybe a line or two across. That's the areas that you can adjust the height. So a strap comes down here and this is, you use this little buckle and strap here to adjust the height of it. So we'll put just a little bit of it there. Everyone, adjust the stirrups to your height there. That's pretty good. Up this angle there. That's fine. That gets the idea there. I think I'm going to crisp up that outer edge here a bit more. Right up like that. The stirrup here is kind of neat because it really kind of pops off, really shows up that side. So let's just add a bit more. That's a lot of detail I put in there, but I think it's worth it because it really shows that side of him there. And there we go. Just around like that and down that side there. That's kind of neat. I love just to use the brush and, modeled brush, like this is what I call modeling. Just grab a little bit and then push the brush flat and harden. So what it does is if you use the tip of the brush, you get a solid color. If you push it down flat down there by that ferrule, because this is that smaller number 2 I like. And if you push it down by that ferrule, you'll get more of a drag, a granulation, a broken edge, a broken color. And that's what I like to drag. So like right through here, if I wanted to bring this like this leather strap down like this, you see I get that little bit of broken color there. And it's a different little look, see? And it has a lot more interest to it than just the color by using just the bristle itself. So let's go up here by the girth strap. We'll just add one of those in. And here, just some kind of light, maybe a little more burnt sienna. We're painting a brown horse with a brown saddle, and so you don't see too much of the definition, but let's just, so that'll come up here usually in a little ring and then around like that. And around that'll go, and you'll have a little buckle stuff usually right in here that will, you put that in. Now mine, I think I gave it to kind of to him. You see kind of a lightweight one, a light colored one there. I think I'm going to do that on my saddle. His is leather all the way. Mine has a there like that. That's see how it skipped? That looks really good. That actually looks like mine there. So that's kind of neat. Take a touch of that light shine there like that. And see, if I wanted to really pop that off, I'll pick up some dark here and give it a contact shadow here down on this side, right up like that, and then that, gives just a bit more of that decoration stuff with it. Now in other saddles you'll see, you may see some of the leather straps and stuff like that that hang down off the edge of the saddle and stuff. So you've seen me put some of those in before. That's that's all up to you how much decoration and stuff you want to give to your saddle stuff. And so I put a bit more into the horse, and like I said, I lightened up and got some into his eye. I'm pretty happy with how his shirt and stuff looks. I could lighten up, especially grab some of that blue. We'll just let some of this dirty burnt sienna stay in there so it gets a little gray. But I could lighten up a bit more of a mark. And especially, one of the things I've showed you at other Westerns is that I'll take some of these horse colors and put them up in there. So see that dirty little mark that came out from my dirty brush? A bit of that flesh tone came out here on that. And I like that. That just gives a real nice look to to him there with that. And I do that here. So if this is too much blue for you or something on it, when I took the photo of it, it looked really, really blue. And, I posted a photo of where I was for those of you in online membership, told you this is coming. And it looked really, really blue. And so I thought, well, that look really blue in the photo. Doesn't look like it here, but really blue in the photo. So I might gray this down a bit. We'll take a little white, a little burnt sienna and some blue here. And we'll take off and just gray this ever so much, just a bit. Looks like he's been working out dirty, which is what happens, one reason why you wear chaps. But we'll just add a bit of that. And let's take a bit of this blue. And the blue jeans are actually kind of violet. So we'll just violet up a little bit here. And just so we don't take all the blue out, but just knock that blue down just a bit with some gray here. There, that looks pretty good. There, like that. Yeah, I kind of like that. And we'll bring in some of that blue, maybe a bit more here. I'll use a little sky color here with that. Here, maybe if I see it's kind of violet, so if I add a little brown or a little bit of this yellow, you see how grayed, because they have a yellowish tone in them, which is a complement, which will help gray this down a bit. There, like that. So that, yeah. See, it's not quite so blue. There, like that, and maybe a bit lighter right up by the knee, which I always believe is you got to bring out that knee, because that's where the bend and the is. He bends at the knee here, so a bit more of that right in here, and we'll lighten up that knee just a bit more here, there, like that. That looks good. I think that's good. But that grays that down a little bit more. See, and that's the beautiful part about, that I love about Impressionism and stuff. And it's so very important, guys, is you travel your colors. So see, even some of this is his hat color, and you start to pick it up into there. That harmonizes your painting a little bit more. And little things like, okay, maybe on that stirrup looks a little bit too much. So I'll take a tiny bit of blue, and I'll push a little bit of blue into that, and it changes the whole feeling of that. Now, I came in on the horse this morning and just added a mark or two of the blue, and I can come in and just add a bit more. This is what we do, right? It's one of the things that just carries some of these colors, the little spark of those colors, right? That just... I like that. Added some of that back up here. A little bit of it here and there on the horse. Just to just creates, because the blue, the sky, it's the shine. So when you have light hitting something, you're going to have these shines and stuff, which are, which is one thing that is emulating, those shines. Let's take, let me go to my number 2 here, which is thinner. This, some white. We'll create this, like I say, this is hard because it's blue on blue, so I like a little bit of the grayness here to it. I mean, not blue on, but it's basically leather on the orangish brown on orangish brown. So let's just draw the top headband here, crossed. Then we're going to push that hair over it, just like that. Just take it out. It's the easiest way, and it's a fun way. And then we'll drop. And what'll make this show up more than anything else is the shadow color. So we'll do that. Now, he doesn't have a nose band on it, on this one. And yeah, then we'll take some mottled up some of that blue and white. Give him a bit of the bit here, there. And a little bit here, right there, a little bit here for like the buckles and stuff that you'll see. You'll have some of those here. That right there should actually have a tiny bit, which above that ear right here, above this right here. So I'll just drop that in real quick. Now I'll take some dark, some blue, and the burnt sienna, and we'll use this as that shadow, contact shadow. So sometimes, like I say, sometimes you see me do these like little shadows like that, and sometimes not. And I'll push something down here. Let's just, and I do the impressions of it more than anything else. So maybe instead of doing it, like a perfect little bit there, we'll put that on. And then let's take some brown, some white, some medium white. It's a pretty color here. We'll just swing this down and around, and this will come back up over here and down and around there just a bit for his reins. Oh, and I hit that dark. So we'll just hit that. And see, I hit that. Got blue on my hand and set it right here. So, and it looks like I did that just a little bit ago because it's already pretty dry. So we get to cover it up. It's a little bit of our brown and white and a little bit of our sky color. And we'll cover that up. Just a little bit too blue, just a touch. But when you're fixing something like this, this is what I do: is I'll fix it, then I'll spread it out a little bit more so you don't notice where I fixed it. And that always works pretty good. Okay, so that's got some of that nice detailing in there. I could add a little bit of highlight right up here. Just something going on, a little light, just a little shine, little light. I like to keep it very, very simplistic there. And so, here he's got this big rope that just sits out over here, and I think I'm going to put that in. Tail, all that I kind of like. I could have a little bit more, some of this brownish light I could drag in through here as a highlight a little bit more, that looks kind of neat. It's a little different color than what it is on the guy there, but I like it because I changed the horse color a touch as well. And I like it. It goes, and I'll use some of that color like in other parts of the saddle, so it all becomes part of it. Here, let's just put the edge of that saddle in there. A little heavier, like that. Lots of different ways that you can construct this, but keep your marks simplistic and then you get the best look. See, just a quick little mark like that, that's where you get the best look, I think. And that, okay, so that's out. That does all that stuff. Let's go work a bit more. See, oh, I want to put a touch of this gray down here into his bottom heel, and touch of this like stirrup color right there. Don't see that too much, so let's just go, because it is on the shadow side. Let's just put in a dark, and we'll let that, let's just put in a dark mark here. Right in here for his boot and stuff, so we'll just put that in, and maybe a little darker right here for the bottom of that stirrup. Because it's in shadow, but maybe just a bit of a light there. Good. Now let's go back in. We'll work on the dog here. And I'm going to use, I went and pulled out this 6 because I really like, to work with that. A small 6 flat or a filbert. Filbert would actually work really better, but I don't have one right out in here for me right now. But I want to just come through the dog. I'm going to model up some of these areas. I'm going to add open medium to everything I paint here because I want it to stay a little wet for a bit as we model some of these colors together. So we'll grab some yellows and this and some burnt siennas and add some open mediums to this here. Some of our light colors. We'll add some open medium to that as well. So as we're working some of this dog here, and I'm just going to go through and state the area, the colors again, but a little differently than I did before. So there's a little yellow and burnt sienna. There's a little burnt sienna that's going to come. I'm just reading some of that area. Let's take some of this light. And this is where I also like to just use the flat of the brush, especially with a dog or an animal like this, because you get all this modeling of the color. I like, let's pick up a little more light. Sometimes I will use more of the tip here, but see, I can push like this. If I got this color really thick, this is what I love. I can push and I can create, I'm going to use this as an idea, but see, I like that secondary mark in there coming through. We'll lighten up his chest. So see, I'll hit the color like this, okay, and then I'll push and pull the color, and that will, because they're two thick colors coming together with that open medium, they'll move back and forth and model together without giving me too much blending. I don't want to really blend. I want these to model. He's got a lot of marbleizing color and stuff on him, so we want that to kind of carry through in him here. And let's grab a little light, a little bit of this, and we'll push through here. There we go. Then we'll lighten up. So it's real thick, so make sure you have that open medium in there. You get such a lovely effect there with that. See, I can just touch that and move that around, and it'll make the streaks of the fur with that. Looks great. Let's put a little bit of light back up here onto the top part of his leg here. We'll just tap it a bit, and it'll get rough looking. Let's put that dark part of his leg in here, right in here. Simplistic here, touch that up and in there. Simplistic, a little bit here. There we go. Let's So you actually see two of his legs here. Two of his legs, and we'll push the second one in here now. Just a little bit of that light. There. That's good. That elbow bends a little bit. I want more of a rough edge, so I'm just going to drag it out just a bit here. There, like that. And build up right here to connect that shoulder right here a bit more. Connect his shoulder up just a bit there. And let's straighten this out a bit. There. Right there. That's good. And let's see. Let's continue on up. Let's take a little more dark up in here into his nose. Right where, up in here where his eye would be. Darken right there. But then we'll come around that eye. Some of this lighter little gray and stuff here. Look at that. Oh, I love that. When I get simplistic like this, that's when it works great. If you go in there with a liner brush and start doing that, it's going to look stiff. And so we want to just do as big of, some marks here at wherever we can, and see how that just puts in a soft little face. And I know I just got it too light, so I'll take some dark back up and take some of that out, and it'll look great. Let's get that warmer yellow. Get some open medium. And you can feel on your brush when you have that open medium in there. Get some of that warmer yellow in there. Get some of that right in here. And I probably, if I'm going to do that much detail, go back to my little number 2 here. And we'll put the light onto that face. Break that up a bit right there. He's got his mouth slightly opened. I don't always like to do that, but let's see what it looks like if we did that, open that just a bit here. And then, so put a bit of shadow and then restate that light right there, like that. It would be darker, but let's put that tiny light spot there up by his nose, up by tip up there. We can even, he has just, it's almost like a little catch light on that eye right there. We could see if we can sneak something in there like that. And it's not too bad. We'll sneak in this light right there. Pull down. Sometimes don't always pull like that. It puts his face too much this way. So, a lot of their fur pulls down. So pull some of that down here. Let's just touch a little bit more. And keep him simplistic here, Dave. Don't get too wild. Just simplistic here. Let's darken, because he's got this real dark right in here, and that's kind of really important. It sets that light dark contrast. So some more blue, maybe some violet into this here. Get some of that open medium in there. Nice dark. Just going to pull right down in here. Set some of that contrast there. Some of that dark pulling down this way. And he can get as dark as you want because he's in here by the center of interest, right? So he can get pretty darn dark here. There, like that. A little bit. Even that looks just great, I think. There we go. Let's put some of this dark down in through here. We'll let some of this disappear, but there like that. Work that color. Some of this back up this way. A little bit hairy edge, pull it out. There. Some of the blue, even some of this in here makes that lighter. Little bits of gray here that we can hit as a shimmer. So I'll put it on. And usually when I do that, I get it too heavy. I make it too heavy, and then I start to paint it into position here. And add some, take some of it out. There, like that. And soften some of this up by his. We want this a little wider. There we go. And I want to work that eye socket there just a little bit darker again. There. That's good. And here we go. Just a soft little. His mouth is open a little bit. There. He's saying, "Thanks, Dad." Did a good. Yeah, my wife saw this painting for the first time this morning, and she says, "I love it." Yeah, and I like some of the comments over on the forum. I posted a step photo of it last night. Thank you guys very much for the compliments on that. Yeah. So you can see, just work those in, right? And there we go. That just softens that just a bit. I like that. I love this mottled area right here. It does such a beautiful job of putting that softer, brownish kind of tone into him. There. And then up into that dark. Right in there. That looks pretty good. Now he has that big brown collar, and I think I'll do that here, just because it carries some of the horse's color in there. Right in there like that. Maybe a little bit of shadow on it. Right in there. A little lighter. Right in here. See, I hold that brush pretty flat, and it gets that little bit of granulation into it. And now that I put that on, I can see there's a white patch into his back that I didn't have. So I will work that into there. Just touch that in. I love the thick colors that I have on here. They've sat out overnight and they've thickened up, and I love it. And if you're, when I need to get to thick colors right away and I don't have time for it to sit overnight and stuff, I use the thickening, the rheology modifier, the acrylic thickener. I add that, and I've only done it a couple paintings with you guys. I use it quite a bit, but I've only done a couple paintings with you guys. I got to do some more with you so you can see that. Let's just add a little bit of that back, and see, you can put that on, and then you just touch it with your finger, and it just creates the edge of that fur, which is, very natural looking there. There, like that. That's pretty good. I like that on him. I think I'm gonna, even though he doesn't have it, I think I'm gonna lighten up a little bit right here. Just push that back like that, just to get a little more lightness right there, and make that little edge. I like that. Okay, so now the last, so I've got that pretty good. So the last is just to do, I like that strap coming down there. But the last is to do, I think I'm going to add that real quick. The last is to do basically the, Here, like that. Maybe a few, because there's one right here. And then, you know, if you want to do that rope and stuff up there, I like to keep it really casual. Use the tip of the brush here. I have a little round here that I could use, but it goes up on the top like this, and so I'll do and I like to do it several times like that, and grab some brown and some light. And then we're gonna, after I do this, and I'm gonna keep this very simple. Very, very simple. Some of that rope. Here, a little bit of white. Here. Here, just a little bit. The sun hits there. And I don't do the individual strands. You might see the individual strands, but I find sometimes that gets a bit distracting, so I don't. We could put that little tie there and let that one come down. But here we go, just something like that. And if it gets too much, you can shadow and stuff, but that looks okay, I think. Maybe a little bit more of a edge right out here. Separate that out just a bit, and maybe just a bit of a lighter one on the inside here. Just like that. Okay, so then the last of it here is really the part that you've seen me do 100 times. I like to use a little bit larger brush, like my 3/4 here, and I like to model the colors through and use a paper towel and lift it up. That's how I like to paint the grasses, and you can see. So the first thing I'll do is take some of these different grass colors here, some open medium. I do everything with open medium. Some browns. I model these all up in here, and I'm gonna just start setting some of these colors in here, and I'll set some light colors, some open medium over here. I'll put some of my light grass colors, maybe a bit of lighter yellows, model those up, grab some of those, and sometimes I go up and down. Sometimes I just use my paper towel like this just to hit the edges to start creating the grasses. So smaller back through here, lighter back through here. So we'll hit, and it's also really good. You've seen me do these all different kinds of ways with you as I come forward. Sometimes I like to just put on some with the knife and then pull through, like right through here, some of these grasses like this. Vary it a bit, right? And then use your paper towel to just hit some of the tops of it there. Let it hit the dog there a bit as he's standing up in it. We'll get some highs and lows. You know, you'll see those highs and lows there, right? And so sometimes I'll take my brush and I'll just hit a few little marks. Sometimes I really like to use that paper towel because it'll move the darks and the lights and everything really nice. Here, we'll just grab some of this right up over the horse's feet. That'll compress them right into the prairie there. A little bit of light here. And then just hit the edges. Just push and you tap it and pull just a bit. It's smaller as you get back. Smaller as you go back there. Smaller little pushes and stuff. And you can, you know, put in different marks. You could come back and add a little more lights and small marks with a liner brush if you wanted, those of you that want to do that. But I'll just do this. And boom, a little bit of this. And I'm just going to come through and add some darks, some lights, model these all up. Let's put some of this. And I will probably also, right into this area here, because I want this dark forward, I'll probably put some, and we'll model this in. See, and up here, boy, you can get really thick. This is the forward part of our painting. So you can get pretty thick. But I'll probably put in a cast shadow too. So I don't have it in there, but you always got to remember you gotta have a cast shadow. So in here into the, because it's coming this way, so we'll push in a bit of a cast shadow there. Try to stay out of our little guy here. But some of this cast shadow would come in here. And then we'll push this light there. Well, so cast shadow will be going back this direction, right? Because sun won't go that way, Dave. Here. And I'll take some of the thicker light right here like this, model that up, just add some of that. And again, when I'm real forward, I like to use the knife. It's dangerous. It was, when I first started doing it, I was scared to death. And then so I was just like, oh, okay, I'm going to put some of this on. Let's get some more yellow into that, some different colors, right? So I'd put on like this, and you know, now that I've done several Westerns, I'm not quite as afraid of that anymore. Then I'll just take this edge and just start touching through like this to create those grasses. See, and it does a pretty darn good job. And I'll probably reset that cast shadow there. But there we go. Just get those grasses in like that. A little too white right there. So I'll tap through just a bit. It'll bring some of that dark back up forward there. Here like that. So you see that cast shadow just lightly there. And maybe retouch this guy, this little dog here, with a touch more white. Right there. So he just pops up a bit more. Right there. That's kind of neat. Maybe a bit of light on the front of his leg there. Right as that's going into the prairie. That's kind of cool. A little bit right there. There we go. And I gotta push that real soft cast shadow back here. Right back in there. Get some of that prairie grass up a little higher there. And here. There we go. And yeah, we'll just push a little bit of that prairie grass right there. And you just need a little bit of paint and then just lift up through it. And it'll push that grass right there, right up next to that. And so the knife works really great because the knife keeps the colors all mottled as well. We don't need that quite back there yet. Maybe a little bit more here. And then, do you want to put a couple cows back there? That's going to be up to you. You know, and you would take your burnt sienna, if you're going to do Herefords or something, burnt sienna, a little bit of blue or so with it, and you know, you would come back here and you know, you would push in some ideas of them kind of like standing out there in a herd. See, soften them out, back out through there, right? It's an impression of them. You know, you could touch a few little heavier spots. A few little lighter goes out into the distance back there. You can bring some of them more farther forward, a few marks right out in through there. You know, like that's the cows back there. You can touch into just a few little marks of white back out there too. Not white, more yellowish white. And that would put some of their faces and stuff like that back through there. But that would be big. And if you're going to come up forward, you could, which I might just put a few little bigger ones, even a little more shaped ones. I'll put a final, what I've decided to do up in the photos here. those of you that are members up on the community page in the membership, what my final is, but that's how you would just simplistically there just kind of suggest some of those cows and stuff. Got that. I do kind of like this real simplistic, maybe a bit of the grass. Just in small areas in between here, you can just use your little brush. But just little bits of it there. Here. Fun painting. I hope you enjoyed it. I had a great time painting with you guys. Painting this with you guys. It's I love doing the westerns, and a lot of you, I was really happy to hear that a lot of you really enjoy the western landscapes and actually want a few more, because there, to me, it brings back a lot of really good memories of all the years that I rode horses and stuff. And now my grandkids are asking me, Dad, Papa, can we have horses again? I'm like, yeah, maybe so. You know, maybe I go back out into that again. But anyway, a lot of fun. A lot of fun. Let's just put a little bit of light right there. Here. You can see that's just a fun way to add some of those grasses and stuff. It's a lot of fun. It's a great little painting. Hope you enjoyed it. Okay, if you did, please hit the like button for me, okay? That really helps the channel a lot. Consider subscribing to the channel so you don't miss anything. Make sure when you do subscribe, if you decide to subscribe, that you click that little bell. Then you get noticed that when we have a video. If you don't have that little bell notice, some of you were commenting on there, I saw you got a video, but I didn't see it. You won't get noticed if you don't have that little bell on, okay? So make sure you hit that little bell, all right? And yeah, then we'll get going. We'll do some more of these fun little paintings. I'll probably put just a little bit of atmosphere on that to push that back. That's just you've seen me do that before. It's just your sky color, okay? But I hope you enjoyed it. I'll do just a couple more little things here. See how that just starts to push that back. Just like that, just softens that back even more. But anyway, thanks very much. I'll see you guys on the next one. And leave me a comment. What do you want to see? What do you want to see more of? I know some of you want to see animal portraits and stuff. I have one coming up this next week. But whatever, I go off of the comments. So if there's stuff you want to see more pet, you want to see more stuff, I go off the comments. So, and it's whoever comments the most. Okay? Thanks very much, guys. And if you haven't, look at going over to the links and going over to our Skool network. So we have an online media network there. You can post photos and talk and stuff like that. It's a really great place to do that too, for the Skool network. And we'll put a link in the video in the description below. Okay? There you guys go. Thanks very much. See you on the next one.